Hey, this is Adam Torres, and I'm here to tell you that it has never been easier to start your very own podcast. At Mission Matters, our goal is to amplify stories that matter. That means we want to help you start your podcast because your story matters. We can do this in 3 different ways. 1, join our podcast school and take a free or paid course. 2, visit our resources page where we've already figured out what you need, such as where to host your podcast. Or 3, heck, we can even do everything for you through our podcast agency, including editing for cheaper than you can do in-house. Oh, and no contract, service is month to month. Get started by heading over to missionmatters.com and click on Start a Podcast. All right, now let's get into the show. Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Marketing Podcast, your source for all things marketing. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres. Keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, today I have Abraham Shafi on the line. He's CEO and co-founder over at IRL. Abraham, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, Abraham. So excited to get into today's topic. So we're going to talk about virtual events and virtual event trends, and I know that's a big thing that you're doing over at IRL. So excited to have you on the show to talk on it. But before we get into that, let's just go a little bit further into your company. So tell us a little bit more about IRL, please.
So IRL is a social calendaring app. We're actually the number 1 calendar app in the Apple App Store and the fastest growing calendar over the last year. We're all about helping people do more together, whether it's in person or in the virtual world. And what's really interesting and what we like to say is we help everyone live their best life. So what that means is really just helping everyone find things to do and find people to do it with.
Well, first off, big congratulations, because to have that kind of ranking in that competitive of a space, I mean, numbers don't lie. Like, you're doing something right over there at IRL. What do you attribute some of that success of the downloads and the app to? Like, what do you accomplish from this one?
Yeah, well, calendaring is actually a very traditionally boring space in tech. You know, when we think about calendar apps, we think about like very boring one-dimensional experiences. But what's really interesting is calendars are inherently social, right? Like, we're doing things with people. Almost everything on our calendar has to do with something else going on in the world. So, and if you think about calendars even pre-internet, they're probably one of the most important products of human history, right? It affects our perception of date, time, and location. You know, the history of the calendar is actually quite interesting. And actually very deep in human society and human culture, right? And yet there has not been a calendar app that has made it fun, simple, easy. And so what we've done is we've sort of reimagined, like, what if the calendar was built today? What would it look like? It'd be mobile, it'd be social, it would have a discovery aspect to it, and it wouldn't be tied to email, it would be tied to chat. So by doing all those things, we've actually been able to push the idea of the calendar further, such that it becomes a fun and enjoyable experience and not something that feels like work.
Wow, you know what? Until you said it, after you said it, it's like common sense. I'm like, duh, you're right, but I can't claim I've ever thought about that. Calendars are inherently social. In my mind, I'm always thinking it's more like a task manager or something else. But when you just said it, I'm like, oh, you're right. Everything in the calendar typically is going to revolve around people. Whether it's something you have to do, a meeting, anything else, there's other people involved. So it is a social thing. I feel like most people that designed them in the past maybe weren't thinking along those same lines. I think that might be a little bit of secret sauce.
Yeah, in fact, if you think about it, actually, all the big calendar apps today, before us, are default. So Google Calendar, the default to email, Outlook Calendar, the default to Outlook email, and iCloud, the default to the iPhone. So all the big ones are actually, they're sort of just like winning by de facto, not because someone thought of something interesting or worked hard to create something deeply meaningful. So it is sort of this like forgotten space that we're shedding light on. So it's actually really fun to take something traditionally boring and, you know, make a social platform out of it. And in hindsight, it does seem obvious. As we've been building this, we're like, oh my God, I can't believe no one's done this before.
That's awesome. So let's switch it up a bit, Abraham. I do want to go a little bit further into today's topic. So trends in the event space and what you're doing in the event space. Where do you want to start with this one? This is a big topic.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much going on, right? So there's all the stuff happening in the real world, of course, and then there's all these virtual events that continually become more and more meaningful, right? And we're seeing it in a whole bunch of different categories. From fitness, there's a lot more virtual fitness happening where people are actually doing fitness with friends online or doing live fitness classes, which is so interesting. Being able to work out from your home without leaving the house. Or when you think about virtual events in the sense of like what we're seeing really big is gaming, right? So like, scheduled live gaming virtually, whether you're playing with your friends or you're watching, esports. It's actually quite fascinating, the entire spectrum of what you can do virtually now.
That's awesome. So what are you, how does this relate to IRL, and how is IRL kind of working within the space right now? I'm just interested to see how everything kind of mixes.
Yeah, so what's really interesting about IRL relating to virtual events and really schedules or anything along those lines is when you think about your calendar, which is sort of like the root of how you make decisions about what you do in the world, when you have empty time, you want to fill it. You're like, okay, I have a free time. Maybe I have all day Saturday free, or I have all day Sunday free, or maybe it's a random time in your calendar. And the reality is like when you want to fill it, we want to show you all the possible things you could do, right? All the possible things you could do online, offline. We want to show you what your friends are up to, based on interest. We want to show you what might be happening around you, because the reality is there's actually so much going on. I think we can all agree there's so much going on that it's actually quite difficult to decide what to do. And usually, finding the signal in the noise is difficult. So one of the sort of successful archetypes of the consumer web is aggregation theory, right? Like in the idea that almost all great consumer companies are aggregators. Google's an aggregator of everything available on the internet. Airbnb is an aggregator of all available homes you can rent. And so for us, we've realized that there is no aggregator of all the possible things you could do at home, virtually, or in person. And then, of course, essentially showing it to you in such a way where there's signal, right? Like there's this one place I go to where I can discover the things that I can do with either my friends or by myself, right?
That's awesome. No, I get it, and I love it, and it makes sense. And as I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, now I'm downloading this thing when I get done. I'm like, it's just a cool concept, and it makes sense. And I think it kind of leads me to the next one, next question, I should say, which is, what do you see as the kind of the future of IRL? Like, what are the plans going forward, other than to dominate the calendar market? I mean, what's the app market? What's the plans for it going forward?
Yeah, so thanks for asking that question. So when I actually think about the calendar and when we're talking about, finding things to do, is almost everything in our life has a schedule, a date, time, and location, right? Like take a religious calendar, a cultural calendar, your local coffee shop's calendar, your family's calendar, your school's calendar, a gym's calendar. None of those are indexed anywhere, right? There's not one place you can go to find all of that. It's actually quite difficult, which is crazy to think, given how deeply important it is in our life. So what we want to do and what we're working on is becoming the standard for the calendar globally, right? So if you want to find any calendar, whether it's like an ancient Mayan calendar, or if it's a calendar in a new country that you're going to visit of like local coffee shops or a local music venue, or a TV show's calendar, or your favorite TikToker's upcoming live stream calendar, or upcoming like YouTuber's calendar, right? Like almost everything in our life has a date, time, and location that affects things, right? Even like the release of a new hip hop album or the release of new sneakers. All of those things have a date, time, and location and impact our decision making in our life, right?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's an absolute, you just blew my mind. I'm like, wow, like the de facto, that's a big mission, Abraham. There's a lot of calendars out there. This is exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, what's cool is our goal is to increase visibility and discoverability of everyone's content, right? So what's cool is driving this win-win ecosystem where more people get to discover these calendars. Like I might not know if my local coffee shop is open or closed right now, and I have to go to Google and call somebody or whatever it might be. There's so many different things going on, or keeping up with my favorite artist's album releases, or new shoes that might be dropping, or my favorite TV show. It's so hard to know when it's going on or off. Like there's like an infinite number of really interesting things that genuinely impact my day that don't live anywhere, right? Like another way to think about it is when you see a social graph, right? It's like Twitter is like follow my thoughts. Instagram's like follow my lifestyle. LinkedIn's follow me professionally. But there's no place where it's like follow my events, follow my schedule, follow the things that might impact whether or not you do something with me, right?
That's awesome. So, Abraham, that being said, and first off, I can talk about this subject with you all day long, these calendars, and I have like 50 more questions, but we're about out of time for today's episode. That being said, if somebody is listening to this right now and they want to learn more about IRL and to connect, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is go to IRL.com. Everything's available there.
Fantastic. Well, Abraham, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing more about your passion for what you're doing over at IRL and talking about trends that you're noticing in virtual events. You do have a unique vantage point there, heading a company with such a large calendar app and following it over at IRL. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review in the Apple iTunes store, and if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Marketing, definitely give us a subscribe there, but also leave some comments in the video. Love to know what kind of projects and things that you're working on. And Abraham, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.